Why all this talk about immigration? Well, I feel like you, of course, know a lot about immigration here in Marshalltown, but I did want to give you just a few facts that put some things in perspective about why we're talking about immigration so much nationally and in Iowa, why we formed the Iowa Immigration Education Coalition and those kind of things. The immigrant population in the Midwest has been growing at a much faster pace than the native-born population. That's true for all the Midwestern states, certainly true for Iowa. One statistic we can name is that the native-born population in the Midwest has been growing at an annual rate since about the last decade or so, at an annual rate of 0.5%, while the Mexican, and this is just a Mexican statistic, there's certainly many more countries where immigrants come from in the Midwest, but just the Mexican immigrant population has been growing at a rate of 5%. So in other words, 10 times the amount of the growth of the native-born population. Then on the other hand, so really, if you look back to 1990, basically all of the net population growth that we've seen in Iowa since about 1990 has been through immigration, okay? Without immigration, in other words, our population would have shrunk. Okay. Now, also another factor that's been going on is that job creation has mostly been in either the high skill or the low skill categories, not so much job creation in the middle. So and these figures are, of course, before the recession, so we've had a little change in some of these things lately, but just to give you an idea, from the year 2000 to the year 2010, 58% of the jobs either were or are projected to be low-skill workers, okay, 58% of the jobs. And the other thing that's made the immigration, we're going to talk about this lots more, but the other thing that's made immigration more of an issue is that there are few legal routes for immigrants to come, particularly in the low-skill categories. So it's led to the situation that we're into today, and we're going to explore that a little bit more. The first thing I want to talk about is really definition of terms so we can talk about how the system works. So anything with law, you're going to have a lot of definition of terms. So I'll try to make it as painless as possible for you here. Okay, the first term that we'll use is immigrant. And an immigrant is, when I talk about it, is a person who's not a U.S. citizen who's coming to the U.S. to remain permanently. You might hear them called lawful permanent residents, or LPRs, green card holder, or they could even be unauthorized immigrants. I mean, when I say immigrant, I mean someone who's intending to remain permanently, whether legally or not. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Now, when I say non-immigrant, most people don't talk about non-immigrants, but lawyers do. So I'm just going to have to use that term, which is non-immigrant, which means really a temporary resident, someone who's coming to the U.S. temporarily on, say, a non-immigrant visa, temporary visa, or something like that. Usually it's for a specific purpose, a visa that they get for a specific purpose, and I'll go into that lots more later. But I just used another term, visa. When you talk about a visa, what you're really talking about is a ticket to get into the United States. It's how you enter the United States from most foreign countries. Now, Canadians don't need to have visas, but almost every other country really does. And I'm going to show you in just a minute a picture of a visa. But the other term that you often hear used alternatively to visa, really incorrectly though, is visa or status. Now, status, when you talk about status in immigration, what you mean is how the person from the other country is here. Are they in legal status or are they not in legal status? Are they in visitor status or maybe H-1B, some other status? Are they in permanent resident status? It's what they are when they're here. Now, you might hear people talking about what their visa is. They kind of use that maybe more like a slang term, what my visa is. They might not really have a visa. They might really mean status. But it becomes important, and I'll show you that as we get going. But let me show you a couple examples. Here is a green card, in case you've never seen one. That's what a green card looks like. It's a plastic card about the size of a driver's license. There have been several different versions over the years. This is almost the most current one that people are facing forward rather than sideways, but it's the same basic idea. This is a visa. This would be a page in someone's passport. And I don't know how well you can read that back there, but it does tell the name of the person, the birth date, the type of visa they have, how long the visa is valid. And during the time that visa is valid, that person can enter the U.S. using that visa. It doesn't, though, control how long they can stay here. If you enter the U.S. when your visa is valid, you will get at the airport an I-94 card, which looks like this. And this is where they have it typed in, but typically these are handwritten because people fill them out on the plane when they're coming in. They put their name and their birth date, where they're from. And then immigration will put this stamp that you see, the kind of oval stamp there. And the top date, the June 25th, 2006, in this example, is when the person entered. That stamp is set that day the person entered. Then the immigration person at the border will write in the way they entered. So in this case, L1. You see that L1, that's the visa the person presented, and they entered in L1. And then the April 23rd, 2009, that's the date they need to either leave or do something else to extend their status. So the visa lets you in, but the I-94 card controls your status. That means this person is in L1 status from June 25th, 2006 till April 23rd, 2009. If they do everything they're supposed to do as an L1 visa or an L1 person in L1 status. But that's really important to understand that I-94 card and the status.